Welcome in. Saturday night means it's time for DFS Chalk Talk, brought to you by Triple Play Fantasy. We get it going right after this. Oh, yes, indeed. It's time to get out of that kitchen and rattle those pots and pans. You know, also time it is to do, Joe. It's time to shake, rattle, and roll, my friend. That's what it also is. So I'm your host, Jeff Machia. I'm here with buddies Mike and Joe. Mikey, what's going on in Nebraska, my friend?
Just same old. It's hot as shit over here. It was a good day today. We got a lot of stuff done. We're getting prepped for winter over here. That's what you do in Nebraska about this time of year. You start getting ready for the harvest, start getting ready for the winter. It gets pretty crazy over here, but otherwise doing pretty good. How about yourself, man?
You sound like a pilgrim. What's going on in Nebraska, man?
There's still a little pilgrim stuff happening here. It keeps you wholesome.
Speaking of the opposite of pilgrims, Joe, what's happening in Connecticut, my friend?
Yeah. Yet the guy's got more routers and Wi-Fi equipment than anybody else I know while he's getting ready for his pilgrimage. I'm ready here in 2024 to talk wide receiver and fantasy value.
No doubt. If you have not joined us before, we discuss all things DFS. However, since it's still the preseason, we're talking a little draft strategy. Last week we did some running backs. This week we're talking wide receiver. I'll tell you, there's plenty to get into, plenty of topics. I mean, we were discussing a little bit before we started the show. I don't even know actually where to begin. Joe, actually, you had a few good points on wide receivers, kind of dual wide receivers on teams. I'll let you lead it off and kind of kick it off where we should go or where to look for as far as draft strategy with wide receiver.
Yeah, it's cool. It's the evolution of fantasy football right off the bat because we went through the years where the running back was always the number one pick. There's been a few years now where you've had your big years for Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts or whoever it may be. QB's got a little glamorous for a little bit. Now, all of a sudden, you're talking to people and, they've got 8 wide receivers on their draft board before Christian McCaffrey. So they're banking from financially here as we're talking about all these contracts. What's really interesting to me is you've got 7 teams that have 2 wide receivers that are in the top 30 overall. So right off the bat, it's like, how do you unpack that? Other than Tyreek Hill, because he's a top 5 and he's one of those 2 teams with Waddle. Other than Tyreek Hill, who you would take, I would take, with a top 5 pick. How do you handle the other really good wideouts where they're on a team with 2 really good wideouts? And I'll throw it back to you guys. Let me just lay out the 7 for you. We're talking Miami, Houston, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Chicago, the Bengals, and the Rams. How do you handle those 14 wideouts?
Mike, I'll let you answer that one, and I'll go after you, my friend.
The thing I like about those tandem teams is they're usually at least semi-productive, even if they're on a week that, say, the other guy blows up, right? Like, so let's say Cooper Kupp goes out there and gets you the 7 for 149 and 2 touchdowns, right? Well, I imagine you could probably still get a stat line out of Puka Nacua that's something like 3 for 40 and a touch. Because if they're doing that good in the air, then you're probably going to see a little bit of spread going on. So I'm really not too worried about taking some of these guys. I do feel like I like those elite receivers, like CeeDee Lambs, your Justin Jefferson, because I don't feel like Jordan Addison's a very good one or very good too. We talk about Ayuk. You guys know I joke about Ayuk and how I don't really think he's that great of a receiver. I think he's just a recipient of a gift that is separation created more by Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel than most of his skill or anything like that, because you're really facing down like the second or third option from the bottom. When you're Brandon Ayuk, when you're George Kittle, because you have to cover IU, or you got to cover Debo, you got to cover Christian McCaffrey. You have to focus attention on those guys, because if you don't, they'll torch you, and they'll torch you every single time you do it. So I like Debo a lot, but as a top 5, I don't really feel like I have Debo in that top 5. I'm on Ross St. Brown. He's and AJ Brown. Now AJ Brown's another one of those guys. Now I don't really think that Devontae Smith is a top 12, but I think he's a very good, solid wide receiver too for you. But I think AJ Brown's one of those guys that I feel like's on those tandem teams that I wouldn't mind having either. Sorry, I could just go off about receivers all day long. What do you?
No, this is great, Jeff. Before you start, I'm going to throw another question in for you too. If you had to have both receivers on your roster from one of those 7 teams, which tandem would it be?
That's an excellent question.
Well, you're talking Hill, Waddle, Diggs, and Nico, let's say. You could also throw in Dell there. Brown and Smith and Philly, DBO Ayuk, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Higgins and Chase, or Nakua and Coop? Huh.
There's a lot of uncertainty. Let's just here's a few things. There's a lot of moving parts in the NFL in the offseason. There's a lot of quarterbacks going to different places. You got a lot of guys in different spots. You have a lot of rookies getting a lot of attention. There's a few teams that have kind of stayed consistent. So you got the Miami Dolphins, you got the Detroit Lions, and you got the Dallas Cowboys, right? So I'm taking Hill and Waddle. I get it. Waddle might not necessarily be the best second choice, but Hill's such a stud, and they're coming back. Nobody's different on that team. Everybody's coming back. It seems like every other team is making moves. So that would be my answer to that one, Joe.
I think I agree, because you're taking the best player out of all of them when you're talking Tyreek Hill. So
I don't think that there's a right or a wrong answer, but I think that is the right answer. I think that's the team. I mean, Waddle, he's a fantastic number 2, as a matter of fact. And I mean, there's a chance that's the tandem that if I had to bet money at the beginning of the season, are we going to have a team that finishes with 2 wide receiver ones? That's where I'd put my chips, is in Miami, because that's the 2 guys I feel like could, Waddle's going to finish a 9 to 11 possibly, but and Tyreek Hill could easily finish as a top 3. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to have that 2 wide receiver ones on your team.
That's true.
And Joe, you brought up Philadelphia, and I was looking into Philadelphia a little bit because I thought, so AJ Brown at the beginning of last year was seemingly destroying things. We almost kind of glossed over this guy and missed the boat on him.
Breaking records.
If you look, he was. If you take out October, 5 games in October from AJ Brown, he's mediocre at best. He has 2 touchdowns outside October, and he's averaging about 60 yards. Because in October, he's averaging about 130, but it's beyond bizarre, this guy's numbers. It's almost like a Deshaun Jackson 0 or 27 kind of thing. You know what I mean?
And then November on, Devonta Smith was really good, right?
I wouldn't say really good. Devonta Smith had a couple games in late November, early December, where he had a couple 20-point FanDuel games in a row. And so I'll give you a couple numbers here. So AJ Brown, over his I think he played all 17 games. He averaged 13.92 FanDuel points per game. All right. Devonta Smith missed 1 game, but he played 16. He averaged 11.69 points per game. I'll tell you something. I will give a shot to a Marvin Harrison Jr. more so than I would one of these guys, because he's such a clear-cut number 1. It's not even funny. I don't know if you guys agree or disagree.
So let's throw that question out there real quick. That's an interesting, and I don't disagree with him on Harrison, but there's 3 or 4 guys you could replace him with as far as the rookies. Mikey, being the resident college pro here out of the 3 of us, where do you put those big time rookie wideouts? As far like are you comfortable with any of those guys being your wide receiver 2 to start the fantasy season week 1?
Zune, I really like, so that's actually the trio that I really like is in the Bears. I really like DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Romeo Zune. Those guys are all stacked up, man. And if you saw anything out of Caleb Williams today, whoo, boy, that kid is looking like he is NFL ready, and it looks like he's ready now, so I think that's the guy that I think I'd watch. I really like Malik Neighbors. I think he's an incredibly talented person. But you got Daniel Jones throwing him the ball. And I like Marvin Harrison Jr., but you've got Kyler Murray throwing in the ball. I mean, so I don't really like these guys' quarterback situation as much as I do, like, say, Rome or whatever, however you pronounce his name. I keep forgetting it's either Rome or Rome, but there's two guys with about the same name right there. But I mean, I don't think that either one of those guys have a clear-cut way to get a lot of targets. I mean, they're going to get a lot of targets, but they're going to be overthrown in hurries and while he's getting sacked. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't really like a lot of the rookies' standout positioning right now this year, but I really do like what the Bears did. And, I mean, DJ Moore, that guy's going like, what did I say earlier today? 49. Keenan Allen's going like 79. Yeah, so you're getting these guys at a way like value. And I mean, you're talking about two guys that could easily, this is another team that I feel like has a tandem that if Caleb Williams can go out and do what he did today, holy crap, man, you got 2-1 sitting right there pretty easy.
Well, let me chime in on that one, Mikey. So, and it's hysterical. We're talking about the Bears offense being relevant because I don't think that's ever happened. But so you have Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift. You got a lot of weapons to toss around, and Adunze, right? So, yeah. So do you take a shot on a DJ Moore, or do you look at a Malik Neighbors? I get it; he's got Daniel Jones thrown to him, but he's a clear-cut number one over Wan'Dale Robinson and Darius Slayton. I guess that's a question I'll pose to you guys, and which is why I'm kind of so high on a couple of these rookies because they're coming in with a lot of hype behind them, and they're the clear-cut number one.
Yeah, no, I like Malik Neighbors. Like I said, I like Malik Neighbors a lot. It's just I wish that they would have maybe done something different at quarterback on that team when he's delivering the ball, even though there should be plenty of garbage time. That still hasn't proven to be like a thing that you really get out of Daniel Jones. I mean, usually his garbage time comes when he runs. And, I mean, so you like him as your quarterback, but you really don't like a whole lot of his weapons. At least I can't remember the last time I actually was like, oh, yeah, I got a Giants receiver that I actually scored some points with, you know.
No doubt.
Like I said, Saquon Barkley was sometimes a win, and Daniel Jones was sometimes a win if you're talking the DFS landscape, which is our bread and butter, right? Like, so, I mean, like, with that said, I just really have never liked his weapons, and it's not because the weapons are bad. I like even Wan'Dale Robinson. I think is a pretty talented receiver. I just think that when you got Daniel Jones and that just incredibly porous offensive line, I don't even know who to blame there. I mean, if you don't have half a second to take a look at it.
Yeah, you can't even trust that he can get him the ball. Like at least with Marvin Harrison Jr., A, his target share is going to be huge because of the rest of that offense. And B, they're going to at least get him, like at least Kyler they're going to get him a lot of opportunities. It's a crap team, but I love the volume potentially of a Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yeah, I definitely like Marvin Harrison Jr. a lot more than I like Malik Neighbors. But if we're talking dynasty, long-term, and things like that, it's actually the opposite. I like Malik Neighbors a little bit better.
I like your Bears question, though. Like, do you pay? I think both Bear receivers are actually lower on the draft board than they should be. Both DJ Moore and Keenan Allen. But it's a good question. Like, do you pay? You know, I'm just really quick looking at ESPN. And I think they had DJ Moore as like right around 25th to 30th wide receiver. And then they had Keenan Allen closer to like 40th. So would you pay up a little bit for DJ Moore or go value, but still get yourself what should be 100 reception receiver in Keenan Allen?
You know, I think this is I think this is one of those things where I'd be happy grabbing both, but I feel like we talked about last week with our running back strategy, or at least my running back strategy starting early. I really don't mind coming out there swinging with DJ Moore as my wide receiver one. I don't think I would feel as confident as Keenan Allen being my wide receiver one. I think that I'd be really happy if he landed down as my wide receiver two, possibly even my wide receiver three, because again, I mean, he's got a 7th, 8th round ADP. So I've got plenty of time to stack up some other pieces and go grab him later.
DJ Moore can make 15 points on one play, where Keenan Allen needs 4 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown for that.
Exactly.
Right, and DJ Moore is more of a slot guy. Keenan Allen's kind of the home run guy. DJ Moore, you would have to assume is going to get like maybe 10 targets, Keenan Allen, maybe 6, 7, that kind of thing. So I would say DJ Moore in that case. Oh, let me throw one other guy at you that gets probably little respect, even though he should, because he's on a team that's just is lost out there right now. So who actually had more targets than Tyreek Hill last year is Devontae Adams. He had 175 targets last year. Tyreek Hill had 171. And nobody's given Devontae Adams any, and he's the clear-cut number one in Vegas, yet I believe it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's Gardner Minshew thrown to him to start the season.
Who is the quarterback there?
Everything I've read still says Aiden O'Connell, actually. I was
Aiden O'Connell, we're all wrong.
Well, I guess that answers my question.
Get the job. I've seen both, but everything I've seen as far as official depth charts go, everything has Aiden O'Connell as a starter.
Well, I guess my point is, regardless, can we name another guy on the Raiders? And Devontae Adams is going to get the targets, he's going to get the receptions, and he's going to get the touchdowns. And as we saw last year,
Michael Mayer. Brock Bauer. They just drafted Brock Bauer. That's a tight end that I got my eyeballs on, dude. Brock Bauer's a big beast of a tight end.
No, I mean, Devontae should get real close to a touchdown a week, and it might be their only touchdown of the game for the team, but he's going to get a lion's share of activity. I know we're coming down to it time-wise. So, we've been talking about the front of the wide receiver draft, all the teams loaded with two guys, the guys at the top. I was quickly looking, and I jotted down like approximately 7, 8, 9 names of guys where I just feel like they're ranked lower than they should be. And we've talked about a couple of them. Just want to throw these names out there, and then I'll let you guys take it wherever you want to go. Is that cool?
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I'll start with, I did have both of the Chicago guys because I do feel like they're both kind of low with Moore and Allen. We've talked about them, so we're good there. But I've noticed Stephon Diggs outside of the top 20. Interesting to me. It's been a while since he's been outside of that. They're loaded in Houston. He's motivated. That'll be curious. You got Rice in Kansas City. He's around 25th, which I'm surprised. And this is just quick looking ESPN ranking, but I'm surprised there. But I'm just wondering if this Worthy thing is so hot that it's kind of making Rice fly under the radar again. You've got Smith and Jigba in Seattle. Now this one, I'm going to have to be careful to not end up having him on all of my teams because he's around 30 for wideouts. And I think by the end of last year, he had kind of taken over for Lockett as the second most dangerous target on that team. So I certainly think he's got a lot of momentum going into the season. And then the last guy I had was, I'm going to butcher his name, Shaheed in New Orleans.
Rashid Shaheed?
Yeah, he was looking like right around 45th to 50th for wideouts. And, he was very sneaky last year. Obviously, now they know what they have there. They paid him a little bit of money. He's their number one there. So what do you think of those guys in general? Anybody stick out to you?
So
he's the one. I think Chris Olave is the one on that team still.
That's fair. You're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He's the two.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, the funny thing was, I was actually gonna say I do like Shaheed. I get it. Olave, and I hate to use Deshaun Jackson again as an example, but it's kind of the feast or famine kind of example that you can come up with. But Olave was the definition of feast or famine. It seemed like Shaheed was a little bit more consistent. So I really like him. I'll throw one more at you, Joe. Is a clear-cut number one, Drake London in Atlanta with Cousins being there. I love that guy. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think at this point, they just made the trade for Judon from the Patriots too, obviously to bolster the defense. But with a real pocket passer and Robinson and Pitts and London, it's hard to not. Atlanta's one of those sports cities where on any Atlanta team, I'm going to say I'm going to have to see it to believe it because that is just a notoriously underachieving sports city with horrible, shitty sports fans too. But that being said, it's hard to not pay attention to Atlanta a little bit here, especially in that division. They could potentially win that division in 14 weeks.
And Mike, I'll let you chime in on that one in a second here. For anybody in the Atlanta area who may be watching or listening, we're going to go ahead and apologize for Joe's comment on that. Mike, I'll let you kind of close this one out. And then what we're going to do is wide receiver, it's a long topic. We'll get into this next week as well. But, Mike, I'll let you go ahead and get your thoughts on that one.
Well, you know how I feel about Kirk Cousins, how I feel about that Falcons offense this year, and how I'm really stoked on it. I do love me some Drake London, but that is actually a guy, yep, I'll have a lot more to talk about with him next week. Another guy that's just sitting there like a ripe apple, ready to be picked off a tree that a lot of people kind of forgot about, that should have a healthy Aaron Rodgers coming back is Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson on the Jets, he's a nightmare, man. He's a hard guy to cover, and he can get some stuff done. So, I mean, yeah, we got plenty to cover next week as well. Just know that this week we're going to get you those. Like I said, I mean, DJ Moore, that should be a guy you're grabbing in the third round and laughing at your opponents because you just got a wide receiver one.
Garrett Wilson, real quick, though. Can he be your he can't be your one, though, going into week one, can you? It's a little scary.
Absolutely. Now I'm not very comfortable with it, but the setup is there with Aaron Rodgers as quarterback. I don't mind giving Garrett Wilson my number one. I think I'm okay with that.
And we'll get into that a little bit more next week because I got a lot to say about that one for sure. But join us next Saturday, 9 p.m. DFS Chalk Talk. Until next time, we got you covered.